He was dared to kiss Ivy. I thought, of course he won't. He's my boyfriend. He'd never do that. But he didn't even turn to me. There was no hesitation. He stood up and kissed her. Right there. Like I didn't exist. That night I walked away. And cried alone. Until a quiet boy I barely knew sat beside me. And made me feel seen again. They say your heart always knows when it's over. But mine didn't whisper or hint. It screamed. It happened during a university club party. A celebration after our media project submission. I'd worked so hard on it, barely sleeping for 2 nights. Dylan hadn't helped, of course. He said editing was not his thing, and that I took these things too seriously. He promised to show up for the event, though, and for once he did. I wish he hadn't. The room was loud with music and crowded with bodies pressed too close. I was in charge of organizing the screening and audio, so I was off in a corner fixing a sound delay when someone tugged my sleeve. "Aria," my classmate whispered, eyes wide. You should probably come see this." I followed her. Across the room, Dylan, my boyfriend of 2 years, was sitting on a couch with Ivy Lee, the flirty freshman girl who had practically followed him like a shadow since orientation week. They were in the middle of a drinking game. People were cheering and someone shouted, "Truth or Dare Challenge." The circle tightened. Dylan sat beside me, one arm slung around my shoulder, the other playing with his phone. Ivy, the flirty freshman who always seemed to orbit Dylan like a lovesick satellite, sat across from us, legs crossed, smile sharp. "Dylan," someone grinned, "truth or dare?" He didn't even hesitate. "Dare." There were whistles. Applause. Someone yelled, "Kiss the prettiest girl in the room, the names start with I." Everyone turned toward me. I looked at Dylan. But he didn't even look at me. He turned his head toward Ivy. No hesitation. And smiled. My stomach twisted. "No way," I said softly, more to myself than anyone else. But then he stood up. And she stood up too. The room erupted with laughter and whooping cheers. And in front of everyone, in front of me, Dylan leaned forward and kissed her. Not a quick peck. Not a joke. It was slow. Drawn out. Hands on her waist kind of kiss. People clapped. Someone shouted, "Get a room." My blood turned to ice. Dylan finally pulled back, grinning. Ivy looked dazed, eyes still on his mouth. Then he turned to me, laughing, "Babe, it's just a dare. Don't look like that." "Don't look like what?" "Like the girl who just watched her boyfriend of 2 years kiss another girl like she wasn't even in the room?" I stood up. Then walked away without saying a word. The cold outside was jarring, but I needed it. My breath came in white bursts as I headed down the back steps, away from the laughter, the cameras, and the betrayal that tasted like copper in my mouth. I made it halfway down the alley when I heard the door slam behind me. "Aria. Aria, wait." Dylan's voice was slurred but insistent. I didn't stop walking. He caught up to me, lightly grabbing my arm. I turned to face him. "It was just a game," he said, as if that explained everything. "I had too much to drink. You know how these parties go." "You kissed her right in front of me like I didn't exist," I said calmly, too calmly. "You didn't look drunk. You looked entertained." His brow furrowed like I was the problem. "It didn't mean anything. You're overreacting." "I'm done, Dylan." He stared. "What?" "Let's break up." He blinked. Then he chuckled. "Whatever you want." He shrugged like I'd just suggested we skip dinner. My chest hurt. Physically hurt. But I nodded, turned, and walked away before the tears could fall in front of him. He didn't follow me. Of course not. For Dylan, saying he was drunk was already a concession. A rare moment of humility. In his mind, he'd done his part. The rest, forgiving, forgetting, moving on, that was my job. And for too long it had been. Every time we argued, I was the one who chased him down, apologized first, made excuses for his distance. I was tired of it. That night, when I got back to the dorm, I climbed under my blanket and lay there in the dark, staring at the underside of the top bunk. I kept replaying the image. The moment their lips nearly touched. The easy way he smiled at her. The way his body didn't flinch, didn't resist. That kind of intimate indulgence. I'd never seen it from him. Not once in our relationship. Ivy and I weren't even that different in terms of contribution. If anything, I did more. On that project, I recorded 3 full takes to her 1. I edited the promo, scheduled the crew, and negotiated the equipment fees. But she was the one who got his attention. She didn't even need to try. I opened WeChat, went to our chat thread. It had frozen days ago. The last few messages were mine. Are you home? Don't drink too much. Your stomach's not great. Text me when you get in. No replies. Just silence. Looking back, he was probably with her then too. The thing about heartbreak is, you don't need full betrayal to feel it. Sometimes it's the accumulation of small abandonments. The unanswered messages. The phone calls ignored. The laughter shared with someone else when you're still waiting on a single reply. A new message popped up. My breath caught. But it wasn't Dylan. It was the alumni group chat. Barbecue stand night. Come join. Followed by a location and a group selfie. There he was. And Ivy, leaning close, his birthday trench coat draped over her shoulders. I remember the day I gave him that coat. He'd said, "With this I'll never feel cold again. Just thinking of you will warm me." Now it was warming someone else. My stomach twisted. I clenched my phone so tightly I thought it might crack. I could still hear the laughter in my ears, but it wasn't mine. It never had been. I opened our private chat again. Stared at it. There used to be affectionate nicknames there. Cute emojis. Midnight voice messages filled with sleepy murmurs. All gone. All replaced with blank space and one-sided care. A graveyard of unanswered affection. I stared at the contact name, Dylan's speech balloon. I changed it too. Then I blocked him. There. Done. But my chest didn't feel lighter. If anything, it throbbed worse. Letting go of someone you once loved, especially when you've been conditioned to believe their crumbs are a feast, doesn't feel empowering at first. Feels like death. A small, quiet one. I cried. Not loudly. Just steady, soft tears that soaked the pillow. And I gave myself just one night for it. One night to mourn the girl who kept trying. One night to bury every what if. The next morning I was woken by a phone call. "Courier downstairs," the voice said. "Someone sent you flowers." I blinked, confused. Dragged myself out of bed, half asleep, still in my hoodie, and shuffled downstairs. A massive bouquet of baby sunflowers met me at the entrance. Bright. Alive. A small card was tucked inside. "Be happy. Guess who?" My hands trembled. For a moment my first thought, stupidly, was Dylan. I unlocked my phone. Still blocked. No messages. No requests. And even if he had sent them, it didn't matter. Because he hadn't chased me. Not at the party. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. Which meant he never thought he needed to. Which meant he never truly loved me the way I had loved him. The flowers, beautiful as they were, started to feel like a joke in my hands. A cruel trick of hope. I stared at the petals, heart hollow. And realized, I had to stop letting myself hope. Because Dylan Reyes had already moved on. It was time I did too. It had been 7 days since the breakup. 7 whole days without messaging him. Without checking if he'd unblocked me. Without reading old chats just to feel something. For someone like me, someone who used to cave after one day of silence, that was a small miracle. But miracles don't stop heartbreak. I had barely eaten anything that wasn't delivered. I kept my blinds closed, skipped classes, and let my group projects pile up. I told myself I'd move on when I was ready. But the truth is, you never feel ready to stop loving someone who once meant everything. That afternoon, I finally forced myself out of bed and into clothes that didn't scream pathetic. I told myself I just needed to walk. Maybe buy some instant noodles or a bottled smoothie. Something mindless. The supermarket was packed. Students were everywhere, laughing, chatting, walking up and down the aisles in pairs. The sound of a plastic basket dragging on the floor followed me like a ghost. I grabbed a few snacks and lined up at the self-checkout. And then I froze. In the line ahead of me, there he was. Dylan Reyes. Hair slightly tousled, black hoodie pulled halfway over his ears, sneakers scuffed in that casually cool way. His basket was half full. And in it, a few snack bars. A small heating pad. 2 different boxes of sanitary pads. Pain relief patches. And a bottle of warm soy milk. My stomach churned. He looked up and caught sight of me. His expression went blank. Not surprised. Not guilty. Just blank. Like I was another customer waiting behind him. Then his phone rang. "Ivy." His tone turned gentle. "Yeah, I found a few options. Do you prefer the ones with wings or?" "Oh, yeah, I'll get both just in case." His voice lowered to a hush I hadn't heard since our early days. I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Maybe both. Funny, I thought. The last time I had cramps so bad I couldn't stand, he brought me a packet of brown sugar water, handed it over without looking up from his mobile game and muttered, "Girls are so much trouble." I should have known then. He hung up and turned again. His gaze landed on me. Cold. Unapologetic. No hi. No, how have you been? Not even a flicker of discomfort. Just disinterest. I took a step forward to bypass him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he still had an effect on me. But just as I moved past, I heard the familiar shuffle of his shoes, and his hand closed around my wrist. Wait. His voice wasn't gentle now. I turned slowly. What is it? He was studying me, more curiosity than concern. Like he couldn't decide whether I was angry or pretending to be. He held up the items in his basket like they explained everything. It's not exactly convenient for me to be buying this stuff. I was just helping out. I stared at him blankly. And that's supposed to mean something to me? He frowned, frustrated that I wasn't reacting the way I always had. It's been a week, he said, the edge returning to his voice. You still haven't had enough of this drama? Drama. That's what he called it. He still thought this was temporary. Another one of our usual Cold Wars where I'd sulk, and he'd wait me out like a storm that eventually passed. What made him so sure I'd always crawl back? I opened my mouth to say something final, something cutting. But the universe had other plans. A sudden screech of rubber. A wobbling tire. I turned in time to see a teenage boy on a bike veering out of control, headed straight toward us. Without thinking, I shoved Dylan aside. The handlebars slammed into me. My leg twisted unnaturally and I hit the concrete hard. Pain exploded through my palm and knee. I could taste dust and blood in my mouth. Everything stung hot and sharp. For a few seconds there was silence. Then, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The cyclist jumped off his bike and ran over. He crouched beside me, brown eyes wide with panic. "Are you okay?" "I didn't mean to, damn your knee. Please don't move, let me." I winced as I tried to sit up. He gently supported my back with surprising ease. From the corner of my eye, I saw Dylan still standing there, completely frozen. His phone buzzed again in his hand. He stared down at the screen, then answered. "Yeah, I'm still at the store. Yeah, I'll be there soon." And just like that he stepped back. "I'll take you to the campus clinic," the cyclist said, already helping me to my feet. "You're bleeding." I started to argue, but my voice cracked. He looked at me again, really looked. And that's when I noticed. He was beautiful. Not in the flashy, overpolished way, but in a quiet, breathtaking way. Pale skin, sharp jawline, lashes long enough to cast shadows. And his name tag, his student ID, had slipped from his hoodie pocket. Mason Lee. He saw me glance at it and gave a tight smile. "Can you walk?" I tried. Failed. My leg felt like it was on fire. Without another word, Mason swept me up into his arms. Wait, you don't have to." He didn't respond. Behind us, Dylan's voice called out, faint, annoyed. "Hey, who told you to pick her up?" Mason didn't even look back. "Is he your boyfriend?" I hesitated. X. His lips curled into a faint smirk. "Then it's none of his business." That was the moment I realized. Dylan hadn't moved. Hadn't rushed to help me. Hadn't cared whether I was bleeding or broken. He'd answered a phone call from Ivy instead. And this stranger, this boy who hit me with his bike, was already showing more concern than Dylan had in 2 years. The nurse cleaned the sand and grit out of my knee, gently disinfecting the scrapes. Mason sat across the room, arms folded, watching like a silent guardian. He didn't check his phone. Didn't fidget. Just stayed. The silence was comforting. After the treatment, the nurse handed me pain relievers and bandages. I stood slowly. "I can walk," I muttered. Mason raised an eyebrow. I didn't ask. He reached out but stopped himself. "Can I borrow your phone for a second?" I hesitated, then unlocked it and handed it over. He tapped in a number. A second later, his own phone rang. "Now you have mine," he said, returning it. "In case your leg gives out again." I stared at the contact name that popped up. Yen. Short. Simple. And just like that he stood. "I'll walk you back." I opened my mouth to decline. He beat me to it. "It's settled." I didn't argue. Maybe it was the pain. Or the numbness in my chest that still hadn't left since the breakup. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that for the first time in a very long while, someone didn't wait for me to beg to be cared for. They just did. The clinic was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional rustle of gauze. I sat on the edge of the exam table, my knee freshly bandaged and my palms still stinging. The scent of antiseptic clung to everything. Across the room, Mason leaned against the wall, arms folded, his expression unreadable. He hadn't left my side once. Not during the cleaning. Not when I winced from the disinfectant. Not when the nurse muttered something about young people and traffic rules. He just stood there. Steady. Present. Like a lighthouse when you didn't even know you were lost at sea. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. When the nurse finally finished, Mason stepped forward and took the packet of painkillers before I could. I'll hold on to these. You don't have to. He didn't respond. Just opened the door and gestured for me to go ahead. I climbed down awkwardly, careful not to put too much weight on my left leg. My steps were uneven, but he didn't offer help again. I appreciated that more than I could say. He let me do it myself. The two of us were just about to leave when the door flew open. I heard she got hurt. Where is she? Is she okay? A voice cried out. It was Ivy. Her high-pitched panic cut through the air as she rushed inside, scanning the room like she expected to see me in a body cast. Her eyes landed on me and for a brief second she froze. Then she smiled, all sweet innocence. Senior Arya. Oh my gosh, you're okay. Thank goodness. She ran to me like we were best friends, like she hadn't been the girl I saw practically lip-locked with Dylan just a week ago. Mason's shoulders tensed and I noticed his jaw tighten. I was so scared when someone said a girl got hit, Ivy gushed. Then I heard it was you and I just, ugh. I couldn't stay still. She turned to Mason, clasping her hands together. Appa, I didn't know you were involved too. Appa? I almost rolled my eyes. Senior, I can walk you back if you'd like, she added with a flutter of lashes. You must be tired and Mason's probably busy. No need, Mason said firmly, stepping closer. His voice was cool, cutting. I'll walk her. Ivy blinked. But don't get in the way. His tone left no room for argument. Ivy's smile wavered. She looked between us like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. You don't have to be so harsh, she mumbled. For a moment no one said anything. And then something in me, something sharp and petty, woke up. I glanced at Ivy's sour face, her reluctant retreat, and felt a surge of reckless satisfaction. I turned to Mason. You said you'd walk me, right? I asked, my voice deliberately soft, deliberately needy. His eyes flicked down to my knee. Then to Ivy. And then he smiled. Your leg still hurts? Walking might be hard. I made a pitiful expression. A little. Without a word, Mason reached out and gently scooped me into his arms again. Ivy's jaw dropped. I didn't look at her. But I felt the heat of her glare burning into my back like sunlight through glass. Mason's chest was warm, steady. His grip wasn't tight, but secure enough that I didn't have to worry about slipping. He didn't say anything else, just carried me out as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for needing someone. The campus paths were mostly empty. The soft thud of his footsteps echoed against the stone tiles. I stared at his shoulder, the slope of it, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He didn't ask questions. Didn't probe. Just kept walking. When we reached the base of the dorm steps, I tapped his shoulder. You can put me down now. He hesitated. There are still a lot of stairs. I know. I'll manage. Mason nodded and set me down with the same gentleness he'd carried me with. I adjusted my balance, limping slightly but stood tall. Dylan would have told me not to be dramatic. Or worse, acted annoyed that I couldn't keep up. Mason just stood quietly beside me. I reached for my keycard when he said, You helped her, didn't you? I paused. Helped who? He gave me a knowing look. Ivy. The name felt sour in my mouth. I used to think she was a friend. I remembered it all. Vividly. The day she arrived on campus, lost and overwhelmed at the train station. I helped carry her suitcase under the baking sun, showed her the best shortcut to the dorms. When it rained unexpectedly during orientation week, I gave her the only umbrella I had. She forgot to load her cafeteria card once. I paid. She forgot my birthday 2 weeks later. I waved it off. Because I thought kindness always came back. Clearly I was wrong. She acted clueless, but she knew exactly what she was doing around Dylan, I muttered. And he never stopped her. Never told her to back off. Mason didn't reply. But I could see something shift in his expression. Something dark and protective. Girls like her love attention, I added bitterly. Especially from people already taken. And guys like him love pretending they don't notice, Mason said flatly. We stood there in silence, the quiet stretching between us like a truce. After a moment he pulled out his phone and showed me his screen. Here. It was his class schedule. He scrolled down and tapped twice. What is this? I asked. My free periods, he said simply. If you need help getting to class this week. I stared at him. Why are you being so nice to me? He met my eyes, expression unreadable. Because you helped me just now. You hit me with a bike, I deadpanned. True, he said with a small grin. But you still pushed someone else out of the way. The corner of my lips twitched. Instinct. Still counts. He started to turn away but then stopped. And also. I waited. I don't like seeing people like you being treated like trash, he said quietly. You didn't deserve that. I felt something catch in my throat. I'll see you tomorrow, Arya. He turned and walked away. And I stood there for a long time, keycard forgotten in my hand, wondering how someone I'd met only hours ago had made me feel more seen than Dylan ever did. I expected Mason Lee to vanish from my life the way most boys do after the drama dies down. But he didn't. The next morning he was waiting at the foot of my dorm steps, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, a soft gray scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. The moment he saw me limp down the stairs he held out a small box. Inside. Strawberry cream cake. My favorite. How did you know? I asked, genuinely startled. He looked away. Lucky guess. I didn't buy it. The box had the exact bakery sticker I once posted about during winter break. A place half the campus didn't even know existed. I said nothing. Just took the box with a small thank you and followed him to class. That became our routine. He never hovered. Never tried to carry my books or treat me like I was fragile. But when there were stairs, he was there. When I was struggling to open my umbrella with one hand, he stepped in wordlessly. When I limped too hard and winced in pain, a warm bottle of water would appear in my bag the next day and he never mentioned how it got there. Dylan had always said I was too sensitive. Mason never said anything, he just noticed. One afternoon we sat on a bench near the campus cafe. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of overcast light that makes everything feel quieter. I was picking apart the cake he brought, avoiding the whipped cream because I didn't want it smudging my notes. You really don't like cream? He asked, genuinely curious. I shook my head. Makes me nauseous. He nodded like he was logging that in some invisible mental notebook. Then he glanced down at his phone. I'm going to a pottery studio tomorrow with some friends. Want to come? I blinked. Pottery. Yeah. I've always wanted to try that, I admitted. He tilted his head. But. I shrugged. Dylan thought it was boring. Said it was playing with dirt. I asked him once to come with me, even just once, and he rolled his eyes. Mason didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I don't know if I'll be any good at it. But if you're going, I'll go. I looked at him sideways. You already planned it. You invited me. Still, he said casually. It won't be fun if you're not there. It was the smallest thing. The gentlest thing. But it made me feel like something inside me had been cracked open and filled with light. The next day I met Mason outside the studio. He'd rolled up his sleeves and looked completely relaxed, surrounded by a small group of his friends. They were laughing, teasing each other, already elbow-deep in clay. When he saw me, he smiled and waved me over like he'd been waiting for hours. He pulled out a stool and gestured to the wheel beside him. Ever used one of these before? Nope. Then you're going to make something hideous. But it'll be yours. I laughed. The nervousness I'd felt walking in disappeared just like that. He helped me set up my apron and pushed a mound of soft clay into my hands. Just do whatever feels fun, he said. Don't think too hard. So I didn't. I pressed and shaped and failed miserably at making a cup. But somehow it felt good, the clay sliding between my fingers, the wheel spinning under my palms. It was messy and childlike and warm. And Mason was beside me the entire time, quietly fixing the parts one messed up without taking over. Dylan never would have lasted 5 minutes in a place like this. My mind wandered to the last time I brought up pottery with him. He was playing on his phone while I gushed about a local workshop. I remember him glancing up and saying, "So what? You want to make me a bowl? I already have bowls." That memory used to make me sad. Now it just made me feel distant, like I was remembering someone else's heartbreak. I was just finishing the warped lump I dared to call a vase when my phone buzzed. I wiped my fingers on a towel and tapped the speaker button without thinking. Arya. It was Chin, a mutual friend of mine and Dylan's. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Sorry to bother you, I know this is weird. But Dylan's really drunk right now. Like really drunk. And he keeps asking for you." I stiffened. Mason noticed the shift immediately. His hands paused mid-shaping. "What do you mean drunk?" I asked flatly. "He can't even walk. We're at that little bar near the west gate. Arya, he's not doing well. He's crying. It's bad." I closed my eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he won't shut up about you," Chin said, sounding exhausted. "I know you broke up. But come on, you two were together for so long." My throat felt tight. Like all the progress I'd made these last few days had snapped. I glanced sideways. Mason was pretending not to listen, but I could see his shoulders had gone rigid. I took a breath. "Chin," I said slowly. "Maybe Dylan didn't tell you. But we're done." There was silence on the other end. "Arya, the girl he's been hanging around." "I know," I cut him off. I saw it with my own eyes. More silence. Then a sigh. "I'm just saying he's not himself right now." "He never was," I said. But I was too blinded to see it. I didn't wait for him to respond. "I'm not going," I said simply. And I hung up. When I set the phone down, I didn't cry. I just looked at the misshapen vase in front of me and smiled faintly. Mason leaned forward, his voice low. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You don't have to pretend." "I'm not," I said honestly. "I think this is the first time I actually meant it." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. We both went back to the clay in silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. For once, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. And I didn't feel like I needed to be saved. The day after the pottery session, I woke up earlier than usual. My alarm hadn't even gone off yet. But my body, it just felt lighter. Not entirely healed, not happy, but weightless in a way I hadn't felt in months. I checked my phone. No new messages. Not from Dylan. Not from Mason either. Somehow I was relieved. It was late afternoon when Mason and I crossed paths again. I was sitting on a bench behind the library, sipping lukewarm tea from a plastic bottle and trying not to overthink yesterday's call. The last bits of daylight filtered through the trees, dusting the ground in soft gold. He didn't say anything when he approached. Just sat beside me, pulling out a protein bar and chewing slowly. I side-eyed him. "You don't believe in greetings?" I figured silence would be more comfortable. He was right. We sat like that for a long while. Just sharing space. Eventually he glanced at me. "You've been frowning for 10 minutes straight." I blinked. "Have I?" He nodded. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated. "Dylan," I admitted. "Still thinking about the drunk call?" "Not really that," I said. "More. Everything before." Mason didn't interrupt. He just waited. I looked down at my hands. He used to cry a lot. But only in front of me. Mason said nothing. He told me once that both of his parents remarried when he was still in elementary school. His mom had twins with her new husband. His dad moved abroad. They stopped visiting. Didn't even call on his birthday. I paused. The first time I saw him drunk was on his 17th birthday. He called me past midnight, sobbing like a kid. Kept asking me if he was unlovable. If he was so broken that even his parents couldn't stand him. I stared at the cement beneath my feet. He always acted cold and arrogant in public. But deep down he was just abandoned. "That's why you kept forgiving him," Mason said quietly. I nodded. "I thought I could fix it." "Did you?" I shook my head. "No. I just made myself smaller and smaller until I disappeared." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was understanding. Like Mason got it. Like he knew what it meant to be left behind. When I looked at him, his eyes were distant, glazed over like he was remembering something far away. "You know," I said, tilting my head. You always look like you're carrying something too. His lips curved almost like a sad smile. What makes you say that? You watch people like you're waiting for something. But you never ask. Mason's jaw tightened and for a moment I wondered if I'd overstepped. Then he said softly, "Can I tell you something weird?" I nodded. "I think we met before." I blinked. Before what? Before college. Years ago. I stared at him confused. He took a slow breath. "You probably don't remember. I didn't even know your name at the time. But I remembered your eyes." The air shifted around us. I felt the wind catch at my sleeves. I was 17. My dad had just died from cancer. I'd been at the hospital for 3 days straight. My mom cried herself sick. My sister was a mess. I felt a chill move through me. I didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just walked around the hospital in a daze. One afternoon I ended up on the rooftop. I didn't even mean to. I just needed air. He paused. I leaned against the railing and, I don't know, I guess I zoned out. The world felt quiet and for the first time that scared me. Because I didn't want to keep feeling nothing. My throat went dry. And then, he said, voice softer than I'd ever heard it, "You showed up." The memory hit me like a wave. The rooftop. The boy with messy hair wearing a surgical mask. His eyes red. Shoulders trembling. I hadn't thought of that day in years. "I thought you were about to jump," I whispered. "I wasn't," he said. "But maybe I could've. If you hadn't pulled me back." I remembered the way I'd grabbed his arm. The way I'd cried, panicked, holding on to him and begging him not to do it. I'd been there visiting my cousin who had surgery. I was young, maybe 16. I thought I was witnessing a suicide. "You hugged me," Mason added. "And then you started listing your favorite food." I choked out a laugh. "I did. Yeah. Dumplings. Seaweed chips. Red bean ice cream. You said if I gave up on life I'd miss all of them." My face burned with embarrassment. "God, that's so stupid." "It wasn't," he said. I looked at him. "You were the first person who noticed I was drowning. You didn't ask for anything. You just held me and cried with me. I couldn't believe it." "You remembered me all this time?" He gave a tiny nod. "After you left I tried to find out who you were. But you'd already gone. I didn't even get your name." "Then how?" "I recognized you the day I enrolled here. You were holding hands with Dylan." I froze. "You looked happy. I didn't want to ruin that." "You didn't talk to me for 2 years?" I asked. He nodded. "I figured if you were loved I had no right to interfere. But I promised myself, if you ever stopped smiling I'd be the first to notice." I stared at him, the pieces clicking together. The strange familiarity. The careful distance. The sunflower bouquet. The handwritten cards with no name. It was always him. All this time. My heart was beating so loudly I thought he could hear it. "Mason." He looked away, visibly flustered. "I'm sorry if it's too much." "It's not," I said. "Because it wasn't. It was overwhelming. It was surreal. But it wasn't too much. Because in a world where people love loudly and carelessly, he had loved quietly. Fiercely. Faithfully. And suddenly I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Not from romance, not from pity, but from deep, genuine gratitude. "You remembered," I said again, like it was the only thing I could say. Mason didn't smile. He just nodded and whispered, "Always." That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the memories of Dylan. Not even because of the heartbreak. It was Mason. Mason who I'd unknowingly met years ago. Mason whose face was still blurry in my memory from that hospital rooftop, but whose presence had rooted itself in my life like something inevitable. Mason who had loved me in a way no one ever had. Silently, faithfully, without demanding anything in return. And I had never noticed. Not once. The guilt hit me in waves. How many birthdays had I ignored the small packages that showed up anonymously? How many times had I opened a card that said only, "Be happy," and smiled absently, tossing it aside like it didn't matter? I thought I was invisible to the world. But someone had been watching. Not like a stranger. Not like a fan. Like someone who remembered me. Like someone who chose me, again and again, even when I didn't choose myself. I was still turning that thought over when my phone vibrated. Ivy Lee. I stared at the screen in disbelief. We hadn't spoken since the clinic. I almost ignored it. But curiosity, or maybe some need for closure, got the better of me. I opened the chat. I know you probably hate me, but can we meet? I have something to show you. You need to see it. I hesitated for 5 minutes, then replied. 20 minutes. Back courtyard. Ivy showed up in a baby pink coat and fuzzy boots, hugging a tote bag like it was a teddy bear. She looked tired. Her lip gloss was uneven. Her hair a little messy. She didn't look like the girl who had flirted with my boyfriend behind my back. She looked human. You came, she said, voice soft. Say what you need to say, I replied flatly. She exhaled and held up her phone. I know what I did was wrong. But I need you to know something. She swiped through the gallery app and turned the screen toward me. It was a photo. Then another. And another. Dylan at a karaoke bar, arm draped over some girl's shoulders. Dylan, leaning against a library bookshelf, whispering in another girl's ear. Dylan at a food stall, playfully holding chopsticks in front of a third girl's mouth. Some faces I recognized. A few were his classmates. Others total strangers. Each one looked at him the way I used to. Every photo had a timestamp. All taken while we were still together. My chest went hollow. I didn't send these to hurt you, Ivy said, her voice shaking. I sent them because I knew you wouldn't believe me if I didn't show you. My fingers clenched around my phone. Why are you showing me this now? Because I saw how you looked at my brother, she said, biting her lip. And how he looks at you. That caught me off guard. He's been in love with you for years, Ivy continued. And I was such an idiot I didn't even realize it until recently. I was so wrapped up in wanting attention, from Dylan, from everyone, that I ignored what was real. I didn't respond. I staged the fruit game, she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. I thought if you saw how Dylan looked at me when he thought no one was watching, maybe it would finally break the illusion. I stared at her. You were never just clumsy. You were trying to break us up. She nodded, shame flooding her face. Because I was tired of seeing you be so loyal to someone who didn't deserve it. I said nothing. Because deep down she was right. I had needed that wake-up call. I had needed something that would slice through the fog I'd been trapped in. I'm sorry, Ivy whispered. I know you won't forgive me. I just wanted you to know. He handed me something, a small envelope. Inside was a printed photo. It was of me and Dylan standing in front of the media building maybe a year ago. I looked tired. My hand clutched his sleeve like I was afraid he'd vanish. He was looking away. I'd never seen this angle before. I took this, Ivy said. And I hated it. Because even then I knew you were the only one trying. I swallowed. Why show me this now? Because I don't want my brother to be your rebound. My head jerked up. She didn't look accusatory. Just honest. He deserves better than that, she added quietly. I took a deep breath. I know. We stood in silence for a while. Then Ivy turned to leave. But before she disappeared around the corner, she looked back and said, You were never second choice. He was just too blind to see you. I walked aimlessly for a while, the photos still spinning in my head. I passed the campus gates and wandered until my feet carried me to the tiny pedestrian bridge near the West Gardens. Mason was sitting on the railing, back against a lamppost, staring up at the sky. He looked like he belonged there. Quiet. So strong in the way that trees are, not flashy, just rooted. You keep doing that, I said. He looked over. Doing what? Showing up. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Habit, I guess. I walked closer and handed him the photo Ivy had given me. He looked at it, studied it, then handed it back. I used to think that was love, I said. Clinging to someone. Holding on even when they didn't hold back. He nodded. I didn't know love could be quiet, I added. That it could be consistent. Patient. Like you. Mason didn't respond right away. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small velvet box. He held it out. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, the exact one I'd bookmarked online 3 months ago but never bought. How? You posted it to your story, he said simply. Said it was too expensive. That it was silly to spend money on things that don't matter. But it did matter to you, he added gently. I stared at it, heart thudding. He wasn't trying to impress me. He had just remembered. All these months. All these small details. I used to get anonymous gifts, I whispered. He nodded. The sunflowers? Me. The scarf. Also me. The tickets to that concert I missed? He smiled faintly. Me again. I felt tears prick the corner of my eyes. All this time? I asked. He nodded. You never needed to ask. I just wanted you to feel cared for. That was when it hit me. Dylan had made me work for crumbs. Mason had been leaving full meals at my doorstep without asking for a seat at the table. And I had never once said thank you. Till now. I looked up at him, tears threatening to fall, and whispered, "Thank you for loving me even when I didn't see it." Mason reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers barely grazing my skin. I would have waited as long as it took. It was Chenong again. Dylan's a mess, he sighed over the phone. He's completely wasted at the same hotel bar. Keeps asking for you. I stood in front of the mirror, holding my phone in one hand and a half-tied ponytail in the other. And why are you calling me? Because he won't stop saying your name. He won't listen to anyone else. Look, I know it's over, but could you just come for 5 minutes? I didn't respond. A knock came at my door. Maybe. When I opened it, he raised a brow. You look like you're deciding between war and peace. I might be. He leaned against the frame. Do you want me to come with you? I never said I was going. You didn't say no either. I gave him a look. You always volunteer for drama? Only when you're in the middle of it. I sighed. Fine. But we're leaving the moment it turns ugly. He tilted his head. You think it's not ugly already? The hotel bar was dim and loud, a haze of cheap perfume and spilled rum. We spotted Dylan immediately. He was slumped in a corner booth, his head bobbing forward, eyes glassy. Chenong was beside him, trying to steady a glass of water in Dylan's hand. When Dylan looked up and saw me, his expression twisted. Then his gaze slid to Mason. You've got to be kidding me. He pushed himself up unsteadily, knocking over the glass. No wonder you've been ignoring me. Couldn't even wait a week before throwing yourself at someone else. I stiffened. Watch your mouth, Dylan. He laughed bitterly. That's rich, coming from someone who used to cry if I forgot to text back. Mason took a slow step forward, his voice low. Back off. Oh look, the knight in shining armor speaks, Dylan snapped. You think just because you carry her books and show up with cake you know her? She's just using you, man. You're her rebound. I could feel my hands shaking. Mason, I said tightly. Let me handle it. He looked at me. Nodded once. I stepped forward. You don't get to say anything about who I talk to or who I trust or who I'm with. You think he actually cares about you? Dylan barked. You've known him for what, 2 weeks? He's done more for me in 2 weeks than you did in 2 years. Dylan flinched. I felt the words bubbling up, unfiltered, furious. You treated me like an afterthought. And the worst part? I accepted it. I let you make me feel like I was lucky just to be tolerated. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. But I'm done. He looked stunned. And I, without thinking, turned to Mason, grabbed the front of his jacket and pulled him toward me. I meant it as a point, a gesture. But the moment my lips brushed his, my mind went silent. Warmth. Real patient warmth. And before I could pull back, Mason kissed me. Not hard. Not forcefully. But completely. His arms came around me, one hand against my back, the other steadying my waist. His body was solid, grounding. His lips moved slowly, tentatively, as if asking for permission, not possession. I leaned in without thinking. The world narrowed. The noise of the bar faded. The lights blurred. It was just him. Only him. A voice pierced the moment. Snow, are you insane? I flinched and broke the kiss. Ivy stood near the bar entrance, her face pale. I tensed, expecting a slap, a scream, some theatrical explosion. But instead Ivy grinned. She grinned. Oh my God, she muttered. You really did it. She looked almost giddy. I mean, I knew you had a thing, but, wow. Mason turned to her, annoyed. Perfect timing. I have questions, Ivy chirped, clearly entertained. Not now, he said sharply. Ivy raised her hands in surrender. Fine, fine. But Dylan wasn't finished. He stormed forward, eyes bloodshot. You think this makes you better than me? Mason stepped between us, calm but commanding. You ever harass her again, he said coldly, I won't be polite next time. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And Dylan, for once, seemed to believe it. He stumbled back, muttering curses as Chinong grabbed his arm and pulled him away. The bar fell quiet again. I let out a shaky breath. Mason turned to me, brushing his thumb against the corner of my mouth where his kiss had left warmth. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. Jenna. No. Ivy stepped closer. So, are you two official now? Mason looked at me. I looked at him. And for the first time I didn't hesitate. I don't need labels, I said. But I know who I want beside me. Mason smiled. Ivy smirked. Well, I'll just go buy celebratory milk tea. You two, try not to kill each other while I'm gone. She vanished. Mason and I stood in the hallway. His hand found mine. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Because something had shifted. For the first time I didn't feel like someone's leftover. I didn't feel like a backup plan. I felt chosen. And I had chosen him right back. Time didn't leap after that kiss. It slowed. Settled. Mason didn't ask me to be his girlfriend. I didn't rush to make it official. But suddenly I was waking up with the warmth of a message in the morning. A good luck sticker before my test. A warm drink that always showed up on days I looked too quiet. We didn't shout what we were. But we existed, together, in a way that was louder than words. Our walks turned into routines. He liked the hill path behind the science building. I liked the little garden tucked behind the art department. So we visited both. We studied together. Not with tension or pressure but ease. I fell asleep once with my head on his lap in the library. When I woke up, his jacket was around my shoulders and a napkin doodle sat beside me. It was a sketch of a sunflower in a coffee cup. Under it he'd written, "You're allowed to rest now." Dylan tried once more. A vague message with no subject line. "You really replaced me that fast?" I didn't reply. Not out of spite. But because there was nothing left to say. He showed up one last time at a campus festival. I saw him across the courtyard. He looked older somehow, heavier with regret. He saw me laughing, really laughing, at something Mason whispered in my ear while handing me a prize from the ring toss game. He froze in place. I didn't go to him. I didn't feel anything at all. Ivy messaged a few days later. He cried. Again. I responded simply. Let him. She didn't argue. Instead she replied. Thanks for not hating me forever. I really was awful. I surprised myself by replying honestly. You made me see the truth. That's more than he ever did. He hearted the message. Then, you and my brother are kind of my favorite people now. Mason and I never talked about labels. But one evening after I handed him a clay cup I made with his initials carved at the bottom, he looked at me with the softest eyes and said, "This means more than any label ever could." And I believed him. The campus was quiet that Sunday afternoon. The breeze was soft. The grass was just starting to turn green again. Spring wasn't here yet, but it was close. I could feel it in the air. We sat side by side on the stone bench behind the art wing, our usual spot now. He had a book in his hands. I was doodling in my sketch pad. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then I broke the silence. You never asked me about the rooftop. He glanced up thoughtful. You remembered? Not everything. But enough. He nodded slowly, closing his book. You looked so different then, I said quietly. Lost. Small. But also, like someone trying to hold it all together. He didn't speak. I continued. I was terrified you were going to jump. I wasn't, he said. I just didn't know what else to feel. I turned toward him. Why didn't you say anything when you first saw me here? Because you were smiling, he said simply. And I didn't want to interrupt that. I looked down at my hands. You waited for years. Not for a relationship, he said. Not even for a thank you. He looked at me fully now. I waited for you to smile like that again. Without pain. My chest ached. Not from sadness. But from something softer. Like a scar finally healing. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. And now? I asked. He smiled. Now I get to sit beside you while you do. I leaned in. There was no dramatic build-up. No swelling music or heart-racing panic. Just the warmth of his lips on mine. Calm, certain, kind. A kiss that didn't demand. It offered. And I accepted. Later, as we sat with our shoulders touching, I asked, "Do you believe in fate?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I believe in remembering the people who matter, even if the world forgets." I smiled. Because in the end he hadn't just waited. He had loved without expectation. And somehow that made all the difference. The end.